There's an empty chair at this funeral. Front row, reserved with a little card that says family. Stick with me, because by the end of this story, you're going to understand exactly why that chair matters. And it might change how you look at your own life. Let's back up. 3 years earlier, Rachel was 32. Normal job, normal apartment, the kind of building where the elevator works when it feels like it, and the laundry room runs on rules nobody's ever explained to her. Nothing was wrong with her life. That was actually the problem. Nothing was wrong, but nothing was moving either. You know that feeling where every day is basically a rerun of yesterday, and you can't tell if you're being patient or just stuck? That was Rachel. It showed up at work, too. Her manager, Diane, had just promoted someone 2 years younger than Rachel into the role Rachel had quietly wanted for almost a year. The one she'd stayed late for. The one she'd basically been doing unofficially for months without ever saying so out loud. Diane pulled her aside afterward. Kind, as always. "Your work is solid, Rachel. Really. Your time's coming." Rachel said thank you and meant it. She mostly even believed it. But walking back to her desk, she did the math she always tried not to do. 2 performance reviews, 3 project leads she'd carried without complaint, 0 promotions. She wasn't being passed over because she was bad at her job. She just couldn't point to one single moment where anything had actually moved, and somehow that hurt worse than an actual no would have. And like most of us, it got worse every time she opened her phone. One night, 5 minutes of scrolling turned into 20. Her friend Amanda had just won an award at work. Big photo, big crowd, a caption that just said, "Still processing this, grateful." Hundreds of comments. "So deserved, knew you'd get there." Then another friend bought a house, another got engaged, another posted beach photos from somewhere Rachel couldn't even pronounce. It felt like standing on a train platform watching everyone else's train pull in one after another, while hers never showed up on the schedule. And Rachel just sat there thinking the thought we've all had and hated ourselves for having. What am I doing wrong? She wasn't jealous, exactly. She was happy for everyone. She just wanted what they had. Not the house, not the trip, just proof. Proof that her life was going somewhere too. She tossed her phone on the couch and said it half joking, half not. "Lord, I'd take literally any sign right now. Doesn't have to be a burning bush. A text would be fine." She laughed for about 3 seconds. Then the apartment went quiet, and the real question came out. The one she hadn't said out loud even to herself. Does my life actually matter? If you had to put one word on the season you're in right now, what would it be? Hold on to that. We're coming back to it. Because what Rachel didn't know yet was that the answer had been sitting outside her building the whole time. Here's the thing nobody tells you about a question like, "Does my life actually matter?" Sometimes the answer is already sitting right in front of you. You just don't recognize it yet. For weeks, Rachel had been walking past the same elderly woman every evening. Same bench, same spot, just outside her building. Not reading, not on her phone, just watching the parking lot like she was waiting for someone. She'd walked past her 100 times without really seeing her. This time, for some reason, she stopped. Same bench the next night, and the night after that. Eventually, the question got too loud to ignore. Who is she waiting for? So one evening, she actually approached the woman. "Do you mind if I sit?" The woman looked up. "Only if you promise not to discuss the weather. I've survived 3 weather conversations this week. I'm protecting myself." Rachel laughed, and just like that, she was sitting on a bench with a complete stranger, having the easiest conversation she'd had in months. Her name was Eleanor. Sharp, funny, way too observant for her own good. 15 minutes later, Eleanor stood up. "Since you've survived me this long, tea?" Rachel had dishes waiting, emails waiting, a whole evening planned around doing absolutely nothing. She said yes anyway. Walking into Eleanor's apartment felt like stepping into the middle of someone's whole life. Books everywhere, photos on every wall, a radio humming from the kitchen. When Rachel complimented the place, Eleanor pointed at a crooked picture frame. "Don't be fooled, this only looks put together from a distance, much like me." When Rachel asked her age, 81, though if anyone asks, tell them 72. I don't need the attention. Rachel nearly spit out her tea. 2 hours flew by, and here's what Rachel didn't notice until later that night. For the first time in months, she hadn't thought about her own life once. No comparing, no scrolling, no what am I doing wrong? Just 2 hours of forgetting to carry the weight she'd been carrying everywhere. That became the pattern. One week she was carrying Eleanor's groceries. The next, she was driving her to appointments. Eventually, Eleanor had her number memorized, for one reason only, the TV remote, which she insisted was personally against her. There were 100 small moments like that. The night Eleanor decided Rachel's new haircut added 5 years and refused to apologize for saying so. The afternoon, they got stuck waiting 2 hours at a pharmacy, and somehow it turned into one of the best conversations Rachel ever had. The time Eleanor taught her a card game from Before You Were a Thought, beat her 4 times in a row, and didn't let her live it down for a week. None of it looked important. That was the thing. It never felt like it mattered while it was happening. 2 years went by like that. Quiet. The kind of friendship that doesn't announce itself. It just slowly becomes the shape of your week. And the bench? Still a mystery. Eleanor sat there every single evening, rain or not, watching the parking lot like she was expecting somebody. Rachel almost asked. Every time, something stopped her. It felt like opening mail that wasn't hers. Then in year 3, everything got quieter. What Rachel didn't know yet was that this was the start of the year that would eventually lead her into a small chapel, to the empty chair we started with. Eleanor got tired faster. 10-minute tasks took 30. There were doctor's visits, then a hospital stay, then another. Helping Eleanor stopped being something Rachel fit into her schedule. It became her schedule. One Saturday, she skipped something she'd been looking forward to for months because Eleanor needed someone at an appointment. The old Rachel would have spent the whole day mourning what she missed. This Rachel just sat by the hospital bed that night, watching Eleanor sleep. Grateful she wasn't the one alone. There were harder nights, too. A night Eleanor couldn't remember if she'd already told Rachel a story, then laughed it off by saying she was just field testing her best material twice. A morning she couldn't get out of her chair without help, and instead of being embarrassed, she simply sighed and said, "Well, that's new." Rachel started keeping a bag in her car, blanket, water, Eleanor's favorite peppermints, without ever deciding to. It just became something she did, the way you start carrying an umbrella once you've been caught in enough rain. One evening, tea in hand, Eleanor studied her and asked, "Rachel, why do you keep showing up?" Rachel actually thought about it. Was it kindness or friendship or habit? Honestly, I don't know. Eleanor smiled. Maybe I'm the one who needed you, long before you ever walked over to this bench. It sounded like nothing at the time. It would mean everything later. The call came just after sunrise. Eleanor had passed in her sleep. 3 days later, Rachel was sitting in a small chapel, and that's where we started this story. The empty chair up front, reserved for Eleanor's son. The one that never filled. But here's what actually surprised Rachel, how full everything else was. Neighbors, nurses, store clerks she didn't recognize. People stood up one after another, and underneath every story, it was somehow the same story. One woman, Mrs. Alvarez, who ran the laundromat 2 blocks over, stood up first. She talked about the year her husband was in the hospital, when Eleanor showed up every single Tuesday with soup, never asking for anything, never even mentioning it again afterward. She didn't tell a soul she was doing it, Mrs. Alvarez said. I only found out because a nurse on the floor recognized her. Then a young woman Rachel had never seen before mentioned how Eleanor had given her a ride to a job interview and left a coat on her doorstep in the middle of a freezing March. No note, no explanation attached. Eleanor had shown up for every one of them, while quietly carrying her own hard season the entire time. Nobody mentioned achievements. Nobody mentioned what Eleanor had accomplished. Everybody talked about how she made them feel seen. And that's when it hit Rachel like a wave. The exact season she'd spent grieving the life she didn't have was the exact season Eleanor needed her most. If Rachel had gotten everything she'd wanted, the promotion, the milestone, the proof her life was going somewhere, would she have had time for a stranger on a bench? Maybe once, maybe twice, not 3 years worth. What if I wasn't behind? What if I was exactly where I was needed? Outside, Amanda found her standing near the parking lot. "You know what's strange?" Amanda said. "I spent years thinking being impressive was the same thing as mattering." She looked back at the chapel, still full of people who weren't leaving. Nobody's here because Eleanor had a title. They're here because she made them feel like they had one. Then she turned to Rachel. "And honestly, I think you've been doing the exact same thing. You just never gave yourself credit for it." Rachel went home that night, but she ended up parked outside her building, staring at the bench, the same bench she'd wondered about for years. A neighbor passing by finally gave her the missing piece. Eleanor's son lived overseas. He completely stopped calling and visiting. "So why did she sit there every single night?" Rachel asked. The neighbor just said, "Hope." That was it. One word. Eleanor wasn't waiting because she was certain someone was coming. She was waiting because hope doesn't let go easily, even when it probably should. That night, Rachel finally let herself open the box. The estate lawyer had pressed it into her hands right after the service, saying only, "She wanted you to have this." Rachel had set it on the passenger seat and hadn't touched it since. Not avoiding it exactly, just not ready. Some things feel too final to open right away. Inside was a journal, Eleanor's handwriting, page after page of everyday prayers. Then one entry stopped her cold. "Lord, if you won't send my son, please send someone." She kept reading. Months passed in the pages. Then her own name. "Thank you for sending Rachel." Her eyes blurred. She kept reading anyway, until she reached the final entry, the handwriting weaker, shakier, like it had been written with whatever strength was left. "She thinks she's just helping me, but she's helping me trust again." And underneath, one more line. "If I go home soon, please let Rachel know she was the answer to a prayer I prayed for years." Rachel closed the journal and just sat there crying, not from sadness, from finally seeing it. The season she'd written off as wasted, the one where nothing seemed to be moving, where everyone else's life looked louder than hers, had actually been the most important season she'd ever lived. She just couldn't see it from the inside.
Maybe this is you right now. Maybe you're in a season that feels small, unremarkable, like everyone around you is moving and you're standing still. It might not mean you're behind. It might mean you're exactly where someone or something needs you to be, in a way you won't fully understand until much later. You don't always get to see the answer while you're living it. Sometimes you only see it looking back. Remember that word I asked you to hold on to earlier? Drop it in the comments right now. Waiting, healing, starting over, stuck, hoping, whatever fits. Someone scrolling through these comments tonight needs to see that they're not the only one in it.